Hi, everyone. So today we're going to finish up Macbeth by reading all of Act 5. It's usually easy to get through Act 5 in one sitting because the final act of most of Shakespeare's plays is very fast-paced. It usually consists of a series of scenes that get shorter and shorter. And in doing so, this is how Shakespeare raises the tension and makes things go a little faster. So that's what we're working on today. There are some excellent reveals that happen in Act 5, so pay close attention because things happen very quickly, and if you blink, you're going to miss somebody dying. In what we read at our last session, we were talking about, we read a very long scene with Malcolm and Macduff, in which Malcolm really kind of tried to test the loyalty of Macduff and appeared to say that he wasn't fit to be king. He had all these flaws, but then in the end, he reveals that he was just kidding about that. He was just testing Macduff's loyalty to make sure that he was really on the up and up and that he really was a patriot for Scotland. He is convinced of that towards the end, but then Ross arrives with some tragic news and tells Macduff that his entire family, his wife, his children, and anybody in his line have all been wiped out by Macbeth. After a few moments of shock, Macduff resolves himself to get revenge for the murders of his wife and children, and Malcolm and Macduff prepare to go take back Scotland. Act 5, Scene 1. It opens up to what it says is a doctor of physic and a gentlewoman. A doctor of physics just means a doctor, somebody who was skilled in the medical sciences of the time. And a waiting gentlewoman is simply a lady servant of Lady Macbeth. The doctor says, "I have 2 nights watched with you, but can perceive no truth in your report. When was it she last walked?" The woman says, "Since His Majesty went into the field, I have seen her rise from her bed, throw her nightgown upon her, unlock her closet, take forth paper, fold it, write on it, read it, afterwards seal it, and again return to bed, all this while in a most fast sleep." The doctor says, "A great perturbation in nature to receive at once the benefits of sleep and do the effects of watching. In this slumbery agitation, besides her walking and other actual performances, what at any time have you heard her say?" But the woman will not say. She says, "That, sir, which I will not report after her." He says, "Well, you may to me, and 'tis most meet you should." She says, "Neither to you nor anyone, having no witness to confirm my speech." So she refuses to say what she's heard her say. Now, at this point, we don't even know who they're talking about, but it becomes clear in this next moment that they're referring to Lady Macbeth, who has been sleepwalking. And I don't know if you've ever known anybody to sleepwalk, but their eyes are open, they seem like they're awake, but yet they are in a dreamlike state. Enter Lady Macbeth with a taper, which is really a candle. The woman says, "Lo, you, here she comes. This is her very guise, and upon my life, fast asleep. Observe her. Stand close." The doctor says, "How came she by that light?" And the woman says, "Why, it stood by her. She has light by her continually. 'Tis her command." "You see her eyes are open," says the doctor. "Aye, but their sense are shut," says the woman. "What is it she does now? Look how she rubs her hands." "It is an accustomed action with her to seem thus washing her hands. I've known her to continue in this a quarter of an hour." Lady Macbeth says, "Yet here's a spot." "Hark, she speaks. I will set down what comes from her to satisfy my remembrance the more strongly." So just to kind of make sure you're with me on this, Lady Macbeth walks onto the scene sleepwalking. She's carrying a candle, which apparently she has commanded that she has light by her all the time. She's afraid of the dark. This seems unlike the Lady Macbeth that we knew earlier. Not only that, she keeps washing her hands as though there's something there that she can't get off. Now, remember early in the play when Macbeth came back after the murder of Duncan and his hands were covered in blood. And he said if he stuck them in the ocean, it would turn it all red. And by contrast, his wife went off to finish the job and make sure she smeared the guards with blood. And when she came back and she said, "A little water clears us of this deed. Look how easy it is. No problem." Well, now we find out it was a problem. All that must have been an act because in her sleep, she is haunted by the thought that she has blood on her hands. She keeps trying to wash it off and she keeps still seeing blood there. The doctor says, "Hark, she speaks. I will set it down, what comes from her, to satisfy my remembrance the more strongly." And Lady Macbeth says, "Out, damn spot, out, I say. 1, 2, why then 'tis time to do it. Hell is murky. Fie, my lord, fie, a soldier and afeard? What need we fear, who know it when none can call our power to account? Yet who would have thought the old man to have had so much blood in him?" So as she's sleepwalking, she's also sleep talking. And in what she says, she's revealing their guilt. The little lines she says come from different points in the storyline so far. At one point, she says, "What are you, a soldier and you're afraid? Don't act like that." And then later on, in the end of that, she says, "Who would have thought the old man would have had so much blood in him?" When she came back into the room and she acted as though it was no problem. Hey, no big deal. Just a little blood, a little water, and it's gone. Apparently not. She was traumatized when she went back into the room and had to smear that blood everywhere. The doctor says, "Do you mark that?" And Lady Macbeth continues, "The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? Will his hands never be clean? No more of that, my lord, no more of that. You'll mar all with his starting." Go to, says the doctor. "You have known what you should not. She has spoke what she should not, I am sure of that. Heaven knows what she has known." Lady Macbeth says, "Here's the smell of blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. Oh, oh, oh." The doctor says, "What a sigh is there. The heart is sorely charged." And the servant lady says, "I would not have such a heart in my bosom for the dignity of the whole body." And the doctor says, "Well, well, well." The servant lady says, "Pray God it be, sir. This disease," says the doctor, "is beyond my practice. And yet I have known those who've walked in their sleep, who've died holily in their beds." Lady Macbeth continues, "Wash your hands, put on your nightgown. Look not so pale. I tell you yet again, Banquo is buried. He cannot come out on his grave." At this point, the doctor says, "Even so?" And I'm assuming he says that line perhaps because she has now revealed that they had something to do with the death of Banquo as well. Lady Macbeth just says, to bed. There's a knocking at the gate. Come, 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 come. Give me your hand. What's done cannot be undone. To bed, to bed, to bed." Now, I want to talk a little bit about that line. Earlier in the play, when she was alone with her husband, after the two of them started growing apart, she encouraged her husband, Macbeth, to let go of things that he could not change. She said things without all remedy should be without regard. What's done is done. Here, she says something similar, but it's not exactly the same thing. Here she says, what's done cannot be undone. So I'd like to ask you to think a little bit about what's the difference between those two lines. What's done is done, and what's done cannot be undone. And if you think about it, I think that you will see that what's done is done just implies acceptance and a resignation for the situation as it is. But when you say what's done cannot be undone, it implies regret. It implies remorse. So she leaves the room, and the doctor says, "Will she go now to bed?" And the servant says, "Directly." And he says, "Foul whisperings are abroad. Unnatural deeds do breed unnatural troubles. Infected minds to their deaf pillows will discharge their secrets. More needs she, the divine, than the physician. God, forgive us all. Look after her, remove from her the means of all annoyance, and still keep eyes upon her. So, good night. My mind she's mated, and amazed my sight. I think, but dare not speak." And the woman says, "Good night, good doctor." So we see that even the seemingly strong Lady Macbeth is not how she appears. She seemed like she was just so strong, almost cold-hearted, and without any kind of remorse or empathy for anyone else. We now see that she has a great vulnerability in her that did not completely reveal itself earlier. Scene 2 opens up. Change of scene. And we have a bunch of soldiers. We've seen them before as extras, but they're nobody really too important. Lennox we've seen a little more than the rest of them, but they're just a bunch of soldiers. They're Macbeth's soldiers. And they say, "The English power is near, led on by Macbeth, led on by Malcolm, his uncle Seward, and the good Macduff. Revenges burn in them. For their dear causes would to the bleeding and grim alarm excite the mortified man. Angus says, near Birnam Wood shall we meet them. That way they are coming. So by that line, we know that these are Macbeth's soldiers, but they're going to meet with Malcolm's forces. Why, we don't know, but it is revealed in a moment. Caithness says, who knows if Donalbain be with his brother? And Lennox tells him, for certain he is not. I have a file of all the gentry, their Seward's son, and many unrough youths that even now protest their first of manhood. What does the tyrant? Asks one of them. Now we can assume that what they're talking about is their king, Macbeth. Caithness says, great Dunsinane, he strongly fortifies. Some say he's mad, and others that lesser hate him do call it valiant fury. But for certain, he cannot buckle his distempered cause within the belt of rule. So Dunsinane is the castle where the king lives. If you may remember, there was a prophecy that Macbeth would not be conquered until the trees of Burnham came up the hill to Dunsinane Castle. So just kind of remember that a little bit. Angus says, now does he feel his secret murders sticking on his hands. Now minutely revolts upbraid his faith breach, and those he commands move only in command, nothing in love. Now does he feel his title hang loose about him, like a giant's robe upon a dwarfish thief. So it sounds like these guys don't really like Macbeth very much. Angus just said, yeah, now he probably regrets all the things that he's done. He feels his secret murder sticking on his hands, and he feels like he's a dwarf in a king's robes, like they don't belong to him. Monteith said, who then shall blame his pestered senses to recoil and start when all that is within them does condemn itself for being there? Caithness says, well, march we on to give obedience where 'tis truly owed. Meet we the medicine of the sickly weal, and with him pour we in our country's purge each drop of us. Now that's where it becomes clear what they're doing. They are going to meet Malcolm and Macduff's forces and join forces with them. So these men, these thanes, are deserting Macbeth. They're going to go where they say their obedience is truly owed. And once again, we see this metaphor at work. We're going to see it a lot in this act, where the country of Scotland is personified as like a person. And Macduff and Malcolm feel that they are the medicine that is going to make their country better. Lennox says, or so much as needs to dew the sovereign flower and drown the weeds, make we our march toward Burnham. So, interestingly enough, they're going to go to Burnham Woods, where they're going to meet with Malcolm and Macduff. And then we can assume they are going to try to take over Scotland. Scene 3 opens up with a very tense and hot-tempered Macbeth. He knows that things are falling apart, and he's having trouble holding it together himself. He's yelling at everybody. He is irrational and hot-tempered. Bring me no more reports. Let them fly, all. Till Burnham would remove to Dunsinane, I cannot taint with fear. What's the boy Malcolm? Was he not born of a woman? With the spirits that know all mortal consequences have pronounced me thus, fear not, Macbeth. No man that is born of a woman shall ever have power upon thee. Then fly, false thanes, and mingle with the English epicures. The mind I sway by and the heart I bear shall never sag with doubt, nor shake with fear. So he's been getting reports that his thanes are deserting. Obviously, nobody likes to hear that. But he also has this false sense of confidence in those prophecies that the witches gave him that said that he would never be conquered until the woods come up the hill to the castle. Another servant comes in at that time, and he says, the devil damn thee black, thou cream-faced loon. Where gottest thou that goose look? Basically, he says, why are you so pale? The servant is trembling, and he says, there's 10,000, what, geese, villain? Soldiers, sir. Go prick thy face and overread thy fear, thou lily-livered boy. What soldiers, Patch? Death of thy soul, those linen cheeks of thine are counselors to fear. What soldiers, Wayface? And the servant says, the English force, so please you. Take thy face hence, says Macbeth. So the servant has just come in to tell him some really bad news, that there's 10,000 soldiers, English soldiers, waiting to attack them. After that servant is kicked out, Macbeth calls probably his personal valet, or his personal servant. Seaton, he says, I'm sick at heart when I behold. Seaton, I say. This push will cheer me ever or deceit me now. I've lived long enough. My way of life has fallen into the sere, the yellow leaf, and that which should accompany old age is honor, love, obedience, troops of friends I must not look to have, but in their stead, curses, not loud but deep, mouth honor, breath which the poor heart would fain deny and dare not. Satan! We can see he kind of goes back and forth with anger, yelling at people. And then he dips into this depressive state where he says, I've lived long enough. I don't even care what happens to me anymore. He says, at this point in my age, I should be falling back on friends. People should look to me and honor me and respect me. But he realizes that he can't expect those things. Instead of having love and obedience, he will have curses, not loud but deep, mouth honor. So he knows that people are cursing at him, not loud enough for him to hear, but they feel it deeply. And that the honor that they give to him, they're just saying the words, they don't feel it in their hearts. His servant comes and he says, what is your gracious pleasure? What news more? Now it's interesting. He just said a minute ago he didn't want to hear any more news. Now he's like, what's happening? Seton says, all is confirmed, my lord, which was reported. I'll fight till the bones from my flesh be hacked. Give me my armor. It is not needed yet, says Seton. I'll put it on. Send out more horses. Scur the country round. Hang those that talk of fear. Give me mine armor. How does your patient, doctor? Now, we can assume this is the same doctor we saw in a previous scene with Lady Macbeth, so his patient is probably Lady Macbeth. One thing I just wanted to explain to you. Macbeth is, kind of frantic and not behaving rationally. He keeps wanting to put on his armor, and Seton tells him, it's not needed yet. Now, this is kind of important because armor was very heavy, and a man didn't just put it on until you absolutely had to have it. It took just a decent amount of strength just to walk and do things when you were wearing your armor. So you didn't want to put it on unless you absolutely needed it. But he changes direction there, and he says to the doctor, how is your patient doing? And the doctor says, not so sick, my lord, as she is troubled with thick coming fancies that keep her from her rest. Macbeth says, cure her of that. Canst thou not minister to a mind disease, pluck from the memory a rooted sorrow, raise out the written troubles of the brain, and with some sweet oblivious antidote, cleanse the stuffed bosom of that perilous stuff which weighs upon the heart? And therein the patient must minister to itself, says the doctor. Throw physics to the dogs, I'll know more of it, he says. So there's kind of a sad, touching moment there where he asks the doctor, how is your patient doing? And the doctor says she's not so much ill physically as that she has sorrows in her. And Macbeth says, can you cure her of that? And the doctor says, I can't. The patient has to do that himself. And then Macbeth says, well, I don't care about medicine, then it's not worth anything. He then yells at his servant again, Seton, send out. Doctor, the thanes fly from me. Come, sir, dispatch. If thou couldst, doctor, cast the water of my land, find her disease, and purge it to a sound and pristine health, I would applaud thee to the very echo that should applaud again. Pull it off, I say. What rhubarb senna or what purgative drug would scour these English hence? Hearest thou of them? Aye, my good lord, your royal preparation makes us hear something. Bring it after me. I will not be afraid of death and bane till Burnham Forest come to Dunsinane. And he walks off, and the doctor says in an aside, were I from Dunsinane away and clear, profit again should hardly draw me here. So the doctor just wishes he was out of there. So it's kind of interesting to me that Malcolm and Macduff see themselves as the medicine that is going to make their country better. And Macbeth sees it the other way. He sees these English as the disease, and he needs to be the medicine. So, scene 4, back with the soldiers. And we now see Malcolm and Macduff and Seward, and they are joined with all of those soldiers we saw in that previous scene who were deserting. And Malcolm says, cousins, I hope the days are near at hand that Chambers will be safe. We doubt it nothing, says Monteith. And then Seward, that English general, says, what wood is this before us? And Monteith said, it's the wood of Burnham. And Malcolm says, let every soldier hew him down a bough and bear it before him. Thereby shall we shadow the numbers of our hosts and make discovery err in report of us. So basically what he says is everybody cut down a branch off the tree and bear it before him. And then we're going to sneak up the hill to the castle so that he won't be able to tell how many people we are. And that is how part of the prophecy is going to come true. I think you can see when you're standing at the hill, it's going to look like the trees are coming up the hill to the castle. Clever, clever. It shall be done, says a soldier, and Seward says, we learn no other, but the confident tyrant keeps still in Dunsinane and will endure our setting down before it. Malcolm says, 'tis his main hope, for where there is advantage to be given, both more or less have given him the revolt, and none serve with him, but constrained things whose hearts are absent too. So Seward says, the only thing we know is that Macbeth is going to stay in his castle and wait for us to attack. He's not going to meet us in the field. Because strategically speaking, that would have been the smart thing to do. And plus, his men are deserting him, so he doesn't even have the manpower. Macduff says, let our just censures attend the true event and put we on industrious soldiership. And Seward says, the time approaches that will with due decision make us know what we say we have and what we owe. Thoughts speculative, their unsure hopes relate, but certain issue strokes must arbitrate, towards which advance the war. And they exit marching. Scene 5, back at Macbeth. He's still in his castle, and he runs out saying, hang out our banners on the outward walls. The cry is still, they come. Our castle's strength will laugh a siege to scorn. Here let them lie, until famine and ague eat them up. Were they not forced with those that should be ours? We might have met them dareful, beard to beard, and beat them backward home. So basically, he's still getting reports saying that the English force is coming towards them. But he says, you know what? I don't care. I'm going to stay in my castle. Let them stay at the bottom of the hill until, they run out of supplies and sickness takes them. If they were not with men who had deserted me, I would have met them in the field and, beat them back home. At that point, there is a scream, as the text says, a cry of women. And Macbeth says, what is that noise? And Seton says, why, it is the cry of women, my good lord. And Macbeth says, I have almost forgot the taste of fears. The time has come when my senses would have cooled to hear a night shriek, and my fell of hair would at a dismal treatise rouse and stir as life were in it. I've supped full with horrors. Direness familiar to my slaughterous thoughts cannot much start me. So in that, he reflects on the fact that he's lived a life of such horror now that when women scream, it doesn't even really bother him anymore. He's just used to it. His servant Seton comes back in the room and he says, wherefore was that cry? Remember that wherefore means why in Shakespeare. So what was that cry all about is what he's asking. And Seton makes this announcement. The queen, my lord, is dead. So Lady Macbeth is dead. You don't find out right now what happened, but Macbeth has probably his most famous speech after this part, and it's often misunderstood. I think because if you saw it staged, you would see that he actually is very grief-stricken and very moved by the news that his wife is dead. But he is in the middle of a crisis, and these are his words. She should have died hereafter. There would have been time for such a word. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, to the last syllable of recorded time, and all our yesterdays lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour on the stage and then is heard no more. It's a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. He seems to have just kind of lost all will to live here. He says life is just one day that creeps in right after another, and there's really no meaning to it. It's meaningless and it's pointless. He says that life is like a poor player. Now, by a player, they mean an actor. Life is like an actor on a stage that struts and frets about, and then when he dies, forget it, it's all done. Life is like a tale told by an idiot. He means a madman, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. At this point, a messenger rushes in, and he says, thou comest to use thy tongue, thy story quickly. And the messenger says, Gracious my lord, I should report that which I say I saw, but I know not how to do it. Well, say, sir. As I did stand my watch upon the hill, I looked toward Burnham, and anon, methought the wood began to move. There's a tense moment there, and then Macbeth says, Liar and slave. The messenger says, Let me endure your wrath if it be not so, but within this 3 mile you may see it coming. I say a moving grove. Macbeth says, If thou speakest false, upon the next tree shalt thou hang alive until famine cling thee. If thy speech be sooth, I care not if thou dost for me as much. I pull in resolution and begin to doubt the equivocation of the fiend that lies like truth. Fear not until Burnham Wood do come to Dunsinane. And now a wood comes towards Dunsinane. Arm, and out. If this which he avouches does appear, there is no tarrying hence nor tarrying here. I begin to be weary of the sun, and wish the estate of the whole world were now undone. Ring the alarm bell. Blow wind, come rack. At least we'll die with harness on our back. So Macbeth is alarmed at the news that the trees are coming up the hill to the castle. I don't think he knows what's happening yet, but he does know that the prophecies seem to somehow be coming true. And although he says he's sick of life and he doesn't really care anymore if he lives or dies, his pride is enough for him to say he's going to go down fighting. He puts on his armor and he says, all right, we're going out. He's going to meet them out in the field. And he says, at least I'll die fighting. Scene 6, very short. Malcolm, Seward, and the rest of the guys are there. And Malcolm says, now near enough. Your leafy screens throw down and show like those you are. You, worthy uncle, shall with our cousin, your right noble son, lead our first battle. Worthy Macduff and we shall take upon us what else remains to do according to our order. Seward says, very well. Do we but find the tyrant's power tonight, let us be beaten if we cannot fight. And Macduff says, make all our trumpets speak. Give them all breath, those clamorous harbingers of blood and death. They often blew the trumpets right before they attacked. So they get there and Malcolm says, everybody take down your branches, throw them down. You go that way. Macduff and I were going to go this way. And so they head off to fight. The next scene, now often when you see this happen, if you can imagine it being staged, people come on one side and then they go off the other side. And then maybe someone comes in from the back so that people are just, as the scenes change very quickly, the curtain isn't closing. It's just one scene right after another. And they're kind of coming in and then leaving in another direction. And then another person comes in. So it adds to the excitement. From another direction, Macbeth runs on and says, they've tied me to a stake. I cannot fly, but bear-like I must fight the course. What's he that was not born of a woman? Such a one am I to fear, or none. So even though the Burnham Wood prophecy is coming true, Macbeth thinks, well, I'm not supposed to be killed by anyone born of a woman, so I'm probably okay. At this point, young Seward is that, main English general. Well, his son, and this is his son's first battle, his son comes forward and you just see him. And this young Seward says, what is thy name? Macbeth says, thou wilt be afraid to hear it. And the young man says, no, though thou callest thyself a hotter name than any is in hell. Macbeth says, my name is Macbeth. The devil himself could not pronounce a title more hateful to my ear. No, nor more fearful, says Macbeth. Thou liest, abhorrent tyrant. With my sword I'll prove the lie thou speakest. And he pulls his sword, and the two start to fight. Now, in the stage directions, it always says things like, they fight and young Seward is slain. But we must understand as viewers that these fights were always, choreographed and extensive. And so there's a long choreographed fight, and then Macbeth kills him. And Macbeth says, thou wast born of woman. But swords I smile at, and weapons laugh to scorn, brandished by a man that's of a woman born. And he exits. The next second, Macduff comes in. Now, Macduff just wants to meet Macbeth. Macduff just misses him. And he says, that way the noise is. Tyrant, show thy face. If thou beest slain and with no stroke of mine, my wife and children's ghosts will haunt me still. I cannot strike at wretched currents whose arms are hired to bear their staves. Either thou, Macbeth, or else my sword with an unbattered edge I sheathe again undeeded. There thou shouldst be. By this great clatter, one of greatest note seems brooded. Let me find him fortune, and more I beg not. So Macduff vows he's not going to even fight anybody that is not Macbeth. He doesn't want to kill anybody he doesn't need to kill. He's just there to take care of Macbeth. He exits one way, and Malcolm and Seward come on from another direction. And Seward says, "This way, my lord. The castle is gently rendered. The tyrant's people on both sides do fight. The noble thanes do bravely in the war, and the day almost itself professes yours, and little is to do." Malcolm says, "We have met with foes that strike beside us." And Seward says, "Enter, sir, the castle." So we're almost done. And it seems as though Malcolm and Macduff and Seward have pretty easily taken over the castle. Scene 8, enter Macbeth. And he says, "Why should I play the Roman fool and die on mine own sword? Whilst I see lives, the gashes do better on them." This is no doubt a reference to the Romans who felt that if you were caught in battle, it was much better, greater honor to kill yourself than to be taken captive. So as he comes on and says, "Why should I bother to do that? I'm still killing people. So the gashes look better on them than on me." Then you hear all of a sudden, you see Macduff enter, probably from behind him. That's my dog, not a bear, just in case you're wondering. Hey, Penny. You say hi to everybody? You say hello? Hey, Phineas. There he is. Isn't he adorable? I know. He's trying to get out of the heat here. Okay, a couple more scenes. So there's this really tense moment, actually, where Macbeth is standing there, and all of a sudden you see Macduff behind him, and Macbeth doesn't see him yet. And Macduff says, "Turn, hellhound, turn." And Macbeth turns and sees him. And we've got the two men ready to face off. Macbeth says, "Of all men else I've avoided thee. Get thee back. My soul is too much charged with blood of thine already." And Macduff says, "I have no words. My voice is in my sword. Thou bloodier villain than terms can give thee out." And he attacks him. Now, this fight is really choreographed and long and intense. And at some point while they're fighting, Macbeth says to him, "Thou losest labor. As easy mayest thou the entrenchant air with thy keen sword and presses make me bleed." He says, "You're wasting your time. You can't make me bleed. Let fall thy blade on vulnerable crests. I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born." So he reveals to Macduff, "You can't do anything to me because I bear a charmed life. No one born of woman can hurt me." You ready for this big reveal? You're not going to like it. Macduff says, "Despair thy charm, and let the angel whom thou hast served tell thee, Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped." Apparently, Macduff was born with a C-section, or, as we say in Shakespeare talk, untimely ripped from his mother's womb. And I guess we can assume that in that time period, that was not considered actually being born. So that is the revelation of that prophecy. And Macbeth knows he's done now. But he says, "Accursed be the tongue that tells me so, for it hath cowed my better part of man. And be these juggling fiends no more believed that palter us in a double sense and keep the word of promise to our ear and break it to our hope. I'll not fight with thee." And Macduff says, "Then yield, coward, and live to be the show and gaze of the time. We'll have thee as our rarer monsters are, painted on a pole and underwrit. Here may you see the tyrant." Macbeth says, "I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet and to be baited with the rabble's curse. Though Birnam wood do come to Dunsinane, and though thou opposed, being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. Before my body I throw my warlike shield. Lay on, Macduff, and damn be him that first cries, hold, enough." So at first Macbeth was going to give up, and then Macduff taunted him and said, "Good, give up, and we'll have you killed and put your head on a stake, and everybody can come see the tyrant." And then Macbeth says, "No, I'm not going to do that. I will go down fighting." And so the two of them kind of leave the stage fighting, and then they kind of come back, and we see Macduff kills Macbeth, and then he drags the body off. From another direction, Malcolm comes on and says, "I would the friends we missed were safe arrived." And Seward says, "Well, some must go off," meaning some must die. "And yet by these I see so great a day of this is cheaply bought." They haven't lost many men. But Malcolm tells him, "Macduff is missing, and your noble son." And Ross, ever the message giver, has this news to share. "Your son, my lord, has paid a soldier's debt. He only lived but till he was a man. The which no sooner had his prowess confirmed in the unshrinking station where he fought, but like a man he died." So here Ross tells Seward his son is dead. check out the father's reaction. He says, then he is dead? Aye, and brought off the field, Ross tells him. Your cause of sorrow must not be measured for his worth, for then it hath no end. And Seward says, had he his hurts before? I think he means, did he kill people before? Aye, on the front, Ross tells him. And then Seward says, why then, God's soldier be he. Had I as many sons as I have hairs, I would not wish them to a fair death. And so his knell is knolled. Well, thanks a lot, Dad. He's like, well, he died a man. It's good enough. Malcolm says he's worth more sorrow, and that I'll spend for him. But the dad says, nah, he's worth no more. They say he parted well and paid his score, and so God be with him. Here comes newer comfort. Enter Macduff, carrying Macbeth's head by the hair. Macduff says, hail to the king, for so thou art. Behold where stands the usurper's cursed head. The time is free. I see thee compassed with thy kingdom's pearl, that speak my salutation in their minds, whose voices I desire aloud with mine. Hail, King of Scotland! And everyone kneels and says, hail, King of Scotland! And then Malcolm has our closing line and says, we shall not spend a large expanse of time before we reckon with your several loves and make us even with you. My thanes and kinsmen, henceforth the earls, the first that ever Scotland in such an honor named. What's more to do, which would be planted newly with the time, is calling home our exiled friends abroad that fled the snares of watchful tyranny, producing forth the cruel ministers of this dead butcher and his fiend-like queen, who, as 'tis thought, by self and violent hands took off her life. This, and what needful else that calls upon us by the grace of grace, we will perform in measure, time, and place. And so thanks to all at once and each to one whom we invite to see us crowned at Scone. So as typical formulaic tragedy, there is at least one guy alive at the end who's going to set things right, put things back in order. And in this case, it is Malcolm. He promises everyone that everybody that deserves it, who stuck by me, you're going to get rewarded. He's going to make a new title called Earl. And he's just going to take care of things. He does mention in his final closing thing that Lady Macbeth killed herself, and that's how she died. But he vows that he is going to make sure that all the people who were loyal to him are rewarded for that loyalty. And order will be restored at Scotland for at least a week or two. Who knows? I know what you may be thinking. You may be thinking to yourself, but wait a minute. Banquo's kids are supposed to be king, right? That was the prophecy. Well, truth of the matter is, Banquo, there was a Banquo and there was a Macbeth. And Banquo's kids actually were king later, just not immediately right now. But his sons actually did ascend to the throne and ruled for many years. So that part of the prophecy also did come true, historically speaking. So thank you very much for watching today. And at our next class, we'll talk about all this together. Thanks again.